Hello and welcome to the Two Tokens podcast about the energy token project. My name is Ineveld. I'm the co-captain of this project. The real captain is Jos Reuling, by the way, but he isn't here of today. So I've got the honor to host this podcast. And today I'm here with Kai Siefert, managing director from Riddle&Code Energy Solutions or Riddle&Code Energy, and Michel Chatelin, partner from Eversheds Sutherland. Welcome. Very glad to have you both here. Before we start, obviously I would like to ask you, if you're not subscribed yet, please feel free to subscribe. You will always be the first to know about any of these podcasts. Two Tokens is hosting many podcasts in the next few days, but also in the upcoming months. So if you want to be the first to know about all the developments in the blockchain space, do not forget to subscribe. Also, I would like to give a brief introduction about what we're doing with the Energy Token project, because I can imagine that a few listeners or also viewers, if you're watching this on YouTube, may not know what we're doing. But within the Energy Token project, we are basically working together with a group of companies and people who would like to contribute about tokenizing the energy infrastructure. So we're first of all tokenizing the assets. In phase one, the project is divided in two phases. And in the second phase, we're trying to tokenize the offtake. So with tokenizing the assets, we are obviously democratizing the assets, making it more available for the broader public, for people who would like to also contribute or invest in these energy generating assets. And with tokenizing the offtake, we create all kinds of new business models, so to say. We could, for example, with kilowatt hour tokens, you could spend them in a way that would be deemed suitable for you. For example, charging your car with your own and paying with your own kilowatt hour tokens, or netting maybe your own electricity bill. So with that way, you can also democratize or decentralize your energy production. But that's obviously in phase two. The first phase of the Energy Token project is coming to an end right now. We are currently busy finalizing the green paper, more or less, in which we explain what we've been doing during the project, what we've learned so far, and also it lays a foundation for the second phase, in which we're going to tokenize the offtake. The nice thing about today is we're having Kai Siefert from Riddle&Code here as well, and they are doing the same kind of thing basically in Austria. You already created.
That's correct.
Yeah, you already created an energy token, and from that perspective, I'm very happy that you've joined the Two Tokens project as well, because you can bring on some hands-on experience. And on the other side, we've got Michel, and I would love to hear much more about your background in a few more minutes. But you've got all the legal background that we need to get this project to the next phase, because we can obviously think about all these nice technical solutions, but if it doesn't fit the legal framework, we obviously can't create it. But so both of you, welcome.
Thanks,
Kai, Kai, would you like to tell me a bit more about your background, what it is that you do, how you get up here, and what it is that Riddle&Code is doing
yes,
at this
absolutely.
moment?
Yes, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Really looking forward to this session. So, I'm from a background a macroeconomist actually. So, I'm an energy native, if you want. So I started my career at OMV. I was working more than 1 decade at OMV as a market analyst, a strategy developer, and also as a digitalization consultant. And I'm privately and professionally very much invested and interested in the energy transition. So I was always focused on the hurdles of energy transition, because for my liking, everything was much too slow. And it was at one of those meetups when I went out, left my clean desk at OMV, and then where I met Riddle&Code, Tom Fürstner, and I was astonished about what he already could achieve in creating machine identities in the digital realm. So basically, the fundamental stone of or the fundament of machine transaction of creating this transaction layer that I was kind of having ideas and dreams about, enabling everyone to partake in the market, not only the energy giants. Yeah. And that's where the journey took off. So we went through R&D projects together. In the meantime, I moved to Wien Energy, the largest regional energy supplier of Austria. And we went into early customer phases. We invented this energy wallet system, which is now a core component of the MyPower platform, an energy tokenization platform, which is based on a dual token system, the asset token, the kilowatt peak token, if you wish, and the utility token, the kilowatt hour token, which I'm really happy maybe to get into more depth about this today. Yeah. And that's where we stand, actually. So we finalized the project at Wienenergie with asset disaggregation model, which I call it. It's based on
that's a nice way of putting it.
Absolutely, yeah. Because you can obviously go both ways, asset disaggregation, but you can also aggregate the asset. There will not be the wrong size for the wrong investor, so you always have the right size for the right investor with tokenization. And so we made a citizen power plant based off that. So we tokenized the largest PV power plant of Austria and sold the tokens online.
That's funny. So you call it the citizen power plant now?
Yeah, citizen power plant, yeah.
It's basically you democratize the asset, but you call it disintegration and now the citizen power plant.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also what we're just about finalizing is on the utility token side, we are basically first time ever offering a real market peer-to-peer energy sharing solution. I'm not talking about trading because it's still not legally really possible to do that peer-to-peer in Austria. But basically the Renewable Energy Directive 2, which has been set into national law in Austria by January this year, allows already for peer-to-peer energy sharing and creating energy communities, renewable energy communities. And that's where we are at the moment. And obviously really happy about the developments in European Union towards the further liberalization of the market, the integration of the end customers, the role of the prosumers, and I'm really positive on the next years and months, also working together with you on two tokens to create some nice applications, some relevant applications to bring this further.
Yeah, it's a very nice way, very nice introduction. I think you already mentioned a few hurdles that need to be like the peer-to-peer trading. I mean, there are obviously many other hurdles as well. Michel, you're a partner at Eversheds Sutherland, also one of the companies that joins this of this energy project from a legal side, because this touches upon so many different legal aspects as well. We've had various discussions. Would you mind introducing yourself also a bit, and what's your background and how did you get up here? Because this is quite an innovative space to be in, and I mean, I like lawyers from a certain perspective, but this is not something that you normally expect.
No, I totally understand you're coming from and all the bias that there is towards lawyers. So thank you for having me, first of all. I'm an energy lawyer by training and by background. Already when I studied, I focused on the energy sector, and actually the trigger for that was put it into actual development was the fact that the Soviet Union just broken down, and we had this issue of lacking of energy in the West and lots of capital and knowledge here. And then in the former Soviet Union, there was a lot of energy, but they were lacking capital and know-how. So then we had a former Dutch Prime Minister, Ruud Lubbers, who came up with this plan to say, okay, let's build a treaty and make sure that the knowledge and the capital from the West will match the energy resources in the East. That became the Energy Charter Treaty, and as a student, I organized a conference on it because I thought it was a good solution for a problem that we had at that point in time. And then going forward, I always focused on the energy sector. But when I started working as a lawyer in a law firm, we have these sector focus groups, and I joined the energy sector focus group, of course. And at that stage, in the European Union, there was a situation that all energy production was centralized, right? You had vertically integrated companies, production was centralized, particularly everything that went through the grid, so gas and electricity. I think for today we talk about mainly about electricity. And then at the initiative of the EU, we started liberalizing the markets. But what does that mean? That means that production and trade becomes free, so everybody can have access to those markets. But coming from a situation that everything was centralized in one hand to a situation where we want to get to, that it's open for everyone, that's a long way. So we had a whole wave or a couple of waves of liberalization directives that came into place in order to open up those markets and enable access to all kinds of new players to the energy markets. So within that field, or that playing ground, actually, I operate as a lawyer. So what do I do as a lawyer? in the beginning, it was a lot about having access to those monopolized electricity grids and gas grids, and training the people in the market that about market-based asset prices. But then later on, because as a person, I'm attracted to innovation and innovative things. And also in law, you have innovations. And of course, you have societal issues. And then the question is, how do we adapt law to it? Law, most of the time, goes behind what happens in society. So how do we regulate things, or how do we apply certain legal concepts to new business models, so to say? So I think around the year 2000, I think I got into renewable energy, which was the beginning of what I would call my energy transition practice, because at the moment I'm almost 100% active in energy transition projects. But in 2000, it all started with the question, how can we bring costs for solar electricity down? I never forget, I think it was Greenpeace who came up with a project and said, well, can we just build an enormous power production plant in Europe and then produce a lot of solar panels and bring the prices down? Is that feasible from a legal point of view and from a financial point of view? So I in that report, I was working on the legal aspects. From then onwards, I think my practice more and more became focused on energy transition. And if I focus on solar now for the moment, it's all about this development that from a centralized energy production situation, we go to a completely decentralized energy production situation, so to say. That and decentralized means that all the consumers of electricity, be it companies or individual consumers or private households, can and will become more and more energy producers themselves, which means that they will need get access to those electricity markets, which are heavily regulated. So what I've been doing for the last 10 or 15 years is, first of all, try to make people aware of the complexities of the electricity markets and the energy markets and what they are facing. If they say, okay, I want to produce some electricity myself, that sounds like a good idea, because, I don't know, I think that fits within the time scale. What are they faced with? I mean, how complex the regulation is. Unfortunately, it's still quite complex. And then help to construct those projects to make it possible. So from then I'll just pause for a moment. But I think from what I've been doing in the last couple of years as well is to look at the movement from the bottom up. So it's basically democratizing ownership of energy assets, but also democratizing production of energy. That was very much also a movement from societies coming up, the incorporation of energy cooperatives, people getting together. So how can we organize ourselves, that we organize electricity production ourselves with solar panels most of the time? How can we co-own a wind farm and then become active on those electricity markets ourselves? That movement, particularly I think in the Netherlands, but also in Germany and Austria, is quite strong, and it leads to a need to, I think, new business models, but also it confronts us immediately with regulatory objections in order to make those things possible. And then one of the things we still have that if we look at liberalization of the electricity markets, the final stages where we are in right now is to give full access to individual small consumers to those electricity and energy markets without any legal hurdles, and make peer-to-peer exchange possible through the existing electricity grids. And we'll come to speak about that in more detail. But so that's why I'm really excited to be involved in this project, because for me, as an energy regulatory lawyer, one of the big issues is how are we going to realize this democratized ownership of energy assets and peer-to-peer exchanges. Technology is absolutely key, I think, in order to make that happen. And let's say traditionally, and I don't hope that people from the energy sector will be too offended, but I think the electricity sector is a bit traditional and old-fashioned compared to the digital sectors, where, particularly the telecoms. I think we need to have a convergence of electricity, of telecom and energy sectors in order to get where we want to to be at the end. But that will take some time. So this project, I think it's a beautiful example of how those two worlds merge, and I hope that I can play a little contribution in realizing that.
Yeah, it's a nice way of how you put it. Like, first the markets became more liberal, and now we see that the markets are becoming more decentralized. But what I find interesting is you mentioned that law often follows a shift in society or other areas. But in this specific space, it's heavily regulated. So you can't really take initiative from a legal side without stepping on a few red lines. Because I often think that the technical part, that's not really the challenge. I mean, Riddle&Code already showed that, and we've been doing it in the energy token project as well. We can create wallets, we can create tokens, we can create crypto anchors, we can put all these things together. But in order to also make it legally compliant and also to foster that peer-to-peer trading, there needs to be some innovation on the legal side, I often think. What's your view on that? What are the hurdles that you currently see within, for example, Austria or Germany, or maybe even wider, because basically we're in the EU?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to distinguish between the investment side and then the marketing side. When we call in energy, we call marketing is basically the process of selling the good that has been produced by the power plant, right? And on the investment side, obviously, the biggest hurdle, I think, still being in the European Union, I'm not talking about wider region, is the discrepancy between different EU member states in terms of, how can you crowdfund a project, for example. So there are different legislations, which makes it hard to make this one European Union crowdfunding platform for energy, right? So this is still a problem. I think there are, similarly to the energy focused directives, there are directives out there for financial legislation, which are not fully set into national law. We are discussing several projects in neighboring countries of Austria, Italy, Germany, and so on and so forth. And that's tough, right? It's really, really tough, and very often, it is necessary in my product development team to have actually a legal advisor, ideally within the product development team, right? So that's on the one hand side. This is the investment side. I think on the marketing side, it's even more tough.
With marketing, you mean
the sales,
the industry,
the selling of the product, exactly. Because obviously there is a big factor that makes the energy market so fundamentally different from any other end product market. For example, selling TVs, and that's the security of supply target. You need to be 100% certain that electricity and energy can be delivered to the customer, unless otherwise, it's very, very dangerous. For example, if a hospital or whatever has no electricity, people might die even. So this is always carved into legislation as well. This is 100% security of supply target, which is good, which should be also the target of every human being in European Union. At the same time, obviously, it can be cumbersome for driving innovation, because it is how to say it. It's always easier to stick to the old structures of how to run a market, how to run an electricity grid, versus maybe opening up to more market-oriented, opportunities to balance a grid, for example, right? And I'm talking especially about making an electricity grid more intelligent, and at the moment, obviously, I see that there is not the biggest motivation of the grid operators really to join in the innovation game, And we at Riddle&Code Energy, we are very much focused on giving them also the opportunity or explaining to them, what's in the game for them, by just also giving them digital transaction interfaces on different energy assets, not only control and monitoring, because they are building sensors and monitoring system and all these things. But what is often forgotten is the transaction interface at the end of the day. And if you want to stick to a liberal market in the European Union, I think it's necessary that we enable these market mechanisms even on the medium and low voltage level. Similarly to we have on high voltage level, but therefore you need, I think, different infrastructure for making transactions. That's where we focus on machine wallets, on machine infrastructure. And here, I'd say there are some players who are more comfortable of getting in touch with this topic and building up knowledge, but it's only a handful. And I think here is one of the biggest efforts that we all as a group also have to take to convince this side, to inform the side that it's actually advantageous for security of supply if you have a solid market mechanisms for these millions of energy market participants that you have in a distributed grid, in a distributed energy market, in a decentrally organized energy market.
Yeah. How do you view that?
I think, of course, it's relevant to look at what problems are we trying to solve, right? The first problem that we are trying to solve, I think, is the democratization of the ownership of energy assets. Which
I think that's a very important distinction: the assets and the offtake.
And the offtake. Yeah. And then the third element, I think, the offtake is the peer-to-peer element. And then the third thing, if you mentioned grid briefly, is the big issue that we have, of course, in the electricity grids, is the capacity of the grids with the increasing demand for transport capacity, which leads to congestion in more and more. How can we solve that with this new technology or with this new innovations? I think democratization of assets. That's the one that's not
that's the easiest.
That's the easiest actually to understand. The problem itself is explainable in the sense how the energy markets evolved. Access to investment opportunities in energy assets, be it oil and gas or nuclear or renewable, is difficult. You have to be in that game. You have to know the people. You have to be on the locations. You have to know how it all works in order to be able to, you need to normally bring a lot of money in order to be able to participate in those investments. So by democratization or creating the possibility for fractional ownership, which is an easy thing to do. If you tokenize it, you open up those assets to a whole new world of liquidity providers, being small investors, basically. And this second part, and in terms of regulation, that's where we are there legal issues or barriers in order to achieve that? If you talk about creating those structures, I think in itself there are legal frameworks in order to enable it. But to give you an example, if we want to have, and that's also how it's being sold, right? It's being sold, buy a solar panel in the farm located there, or buy a part in a wind farm. Well, do I then really legally own a solar panel or a blade of a wind farm, or is it a indirect ownership?
And the use
because I own a share in a structure, which we call an SPV, that owns that asset, and then it's so okay. Yeah. But that's because individual ownership of a solar panel, for instance, that creates some legal issues, hurdles, which I won't talk about now in detail unless you think it's interesting. So we have this industry structure. So that's. So I don't think there are any legal barriers in order to enable that peer-to-peer exchange. So the kilowatt hours that we want to sell. There we have, of course, consumer protection from the regulator's point of view. That means that if you supply electricity to a small consumer, you need a license, you need a permit, and you need to be regulated and supervised by authorities in order, because we want a security supply. You just mentioned it is one of the basis elements of our energy system. We want to make sure that energy is still a utility. It's an essential good for our daily lives and for our economy. So security supply is really important. How does it work in practice? For instance, that if you are a supplier, let's say you're a new entrant and you buy to small off-takers electricity and you go bankrupt, we have a mechanism in place that the regulator will appoint another party that will take over those customer group in order to continue the supply. And that's just a mechanism that's in the law. In order to for security supply. So we have to enable this free peer-to-peer exchange. I mean, that's the second point. For that, we need to create exemptions, I think, or safe havens for structures where consumers decide to trade directly amongst each other or to each other, and that they are prepared to perhaps not to have that protection that the law gives them at this moment. Huh?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like and then the third point, and then I just want to make the grid congestion, because I'm really interested what your ideas about it is. The grid congestion issue, there how we're going to, I mean, that means that you have to organize production or demand in a way that when the grid is down and they say that it needs energy, that you feed it in, and if there's an excess electricity, that you reduce your offtake. So, of course, if you have all the small consumers and we can connect them, which we can digitally, and then we make sure that at the same moment you aggregate that demand or supply, so it will be activated or it will be disactivated whenever it's appropriate. Yeah, that's of course at the moment that's only being done by large entities that are connected, and they get paid for it. So if we tap that a possibility, yeah, I think that's I would say it's the holy grail.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really, I really want to make the point for the fourth liberalization package, if you want, right? Yes. Because we are in the middle of a chicken and egg problem here, right? So if you want to flexibilize the demand side, the consumption side, which could help you massively with grid congestion issues, right? First of all, you need the market for everyone that can bid his demand flexibly into the market, especially even smallest loads, right? On the other hand, you need the network size. So if nobody is joining, it makes no sense, right? But the network will only be created if there's fundamental value. So if it makes sense to join the network. That's why we started with an asset tokenization project, because we can win many, many thousands of people within one-to-N relation between one asset and then thousands of customers quickly, and getting their perspective on renewable energy and the way this business works, and getting their entrepreneurial instinct as an end consumer about this, what the energy transition is about, yeah, and getting their interest, because before it was just an anonymous topic. Electricity comes out of the plug. It's a topic of non-interest, yeah. And so this, to create this network is an issue. But then at the same time, we always stumble upon the problem of existing legislation that is prohibiting further, peer-to-peer energy trading. And one of the concrete examples I want to give is this one supplier rule that many European member states face. Even if you are in an energy community, for the residual supply, you can only make a contract with one supplier, at least in Austria and several other nations. So this is a big problem, right? Because these basically is not a market. It's not supporting market-based mechanisms. Because at the end of the day, they always fall back to the supplier rule. If this would be gone, if you could basically have, and I think we should have, and it's possible to technically to make this perfectly secure, to have more than one supplier at the same time, then you would see astonishing simplification of new participation models. Yeah, for example, you could make a real standalone crowdfunding platform that allows to participate in any project, in any renewable energy project in your region, if you wish, yeah, in your let's say maybe in your pricing zone that you are, which is I think a nice and logic framing of where you want to act, and then you can receive the kilowatt-hour tokens and deduct them from any energy bill of any supplier out there, right? And and get it delivered to your house. Yeah, if you and at the same point in time require energy, because that's very important. I don't want to get into any virtual more of these virtual schemes. I want to have like basically a match between the point in time of production and the point in time of consumption. So it is indeed good for the grid, and it is helping to manage congestion. And it's all coming back. That's just one example, and there's several others. This one supplier rule, that you're only allowed to be supplied by one supplier at a time.
Yeah, you would almost think that deviating from that one supplier rule would make it just more reliable, the whole grid, the whole infrastructure.
I think what happens, what I understand from people from the sector, is that what happens in Ukraine, for instance, where remarkably there's still a lot of electricity available. And the electricity grids in Europe haven't destabilized so far, although they're connected, is that the distributed energy production we have already contributes to a large extent for stabilizing the grids. So the further distributing energy production in a decentralized way will enforce stability of the grid by itself.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it becomes unstable if you have disbalances between demand and supply on localized situations. So, for instance, we're sitting here in the neighborhood of Schiphol area, and the Netherlands is very popular for data centers, and they use a lot of energy. Yeah. So you have and I think Amsterdam is an internet hub, so everybody wants to be in the area of but all those players, they come into this market and they have a large energy demand, and then obviously the grid gets congested.
Yeah.
So how are we going to solve that?
But that's obviously, like you mentioned as well, the bigger the network, the bigger the community, the safer that is.
Yeah.
The thing is, what I find interesting, I think at this moment, decentralizing energy supply, I think with all the turmoil that we see around, I think, although it may not be nice, it is, I think, the right moment to develop this further. I think now we see the importance of decentralizing energy, and also allowing citizens to participate directly in energy generating assets, so to say. From before we need to, because half an hour goes by so quickly and we already need to wrap up, but we already see, like, you've done it in a small community, basically, with Green Energy, as you mentioned earlier. And I think from my perspective, I think the way to grow this and to foster this innovation is to start small within a small community and grow it larger and larger. What kind of opportunities or hurdles do you see within the EU for standardization, for example? I think that we need to go to some sort of tokenization, standardization model in order to foster these kind of communities, so that if we, for example, would have another community that would create the same token standards or the same standards, that then later on these communities can connect as well. How do you view these developments?
Yeah. So first of all, we need to realize that working with tokens is basically working on standards. I mean, a token is a container, it's a digital container which is made for squeezing in different kinds of data, whatever. It can be transaction data, production data, master data, moving data, whatever you have. But then at the end of the day, it's a container that gives a certain framework and a standard for this. So anybody in the network knows exactly on the first sight what's behind this token. What standards does this token represent? So working on tokens is working on standards, right? And I think this is now definitely some content for a very, very long discussion, but I try to get on the most important things. It would be already a big advantage to have a kilowatt-hour token that is accepted by off-takers and suppliers at the same time in one nation, ideally across nations in the European Union. So the micro investor, the end consumer, he wants to hedge his own electricity production, you want to become a prosumer only by participating in a renewable energy asset without being, having access to an own roof or whatever, to find more and more opportunities to basically use this kilowatt hour tokens, and especially keeping these kilowatt hours in the electricity system, right? Not buying groceries at the supermarket as we started off, just to make the case, right? Just to get some awareness, but really keep it in the system. And obviously that's a long and winding road. It's about negotiating with other suppliers. Obviously, I think on the private side, we need to accept that we are the front runners of the regulation. The things that we create now, today, the contracts that we sitting on this table, and maybe the partners in 2 tokens, they sign with each other in the coming months and years, and the token systems that we put at the center of these contracts might very well become the future industry standard, and we need to be aware of this. So it's about us. It's about us to show the world, how it can be done. And obviously, it's a many-to-many problem. So working with blockchain, you need to think big, right? It's a global thing. You need to think it global systems, and it's always about bringing together the minds and the perspectives of many players. And standardization is as simple and boring and as complicated as that, right? Yeah. Sitting together, discussing it through, discovering the hurdles, finding together solutions, and then committing on this, hopefully. So it's a...
Well, I think you basically summarized one of the main purposes of the energy token project, and that's also why I'm very happy to have this multi-dimensional team, so to say. And also, maybe to wrap it up, what's your view on standardization? What's the best way of achieving that from a legal side, the quickest way, just in one brief minute?
I know it's a dangerous question to ask a lawyer. We all understand it. No, what comes to mind, first of all, is that we have an existing framework, right, which we can apply. And I think what we don't have, and the question is how to deal with it, is the tokenization as such, and how to treat tokens. Are these security, but to be dealt with from financial regulation? I didn't speak about financial regulation, but of course that's a very important part if you talk about attracting investments and trading, let's say, securities, if I say the word, or tokens, whether it should be called by these financial regulations. But the token, like we have in Liechtenstein, we have this law where tokens are seen as a new legal concept, basically, or are we going to apply the existing new concepts to it? So that's a way of standardization. I think electricity, for my first response, electricity as such is a homogeneous good. We are able to trade it. I think you can... I wouldn't be too worried about standardization at the moment. What is important, of course, is that if it's tokenized, that it's accepted, and that's. But I think that I don't see a legal impediments so far. I mean, we can agree with all the suppliers that we want to accept 1 or 10 or 100 different types of tokens if they have a certain characteristic, so that we know the amount of electricity, where it's generated, et cetera, so that you have sufficient information. But then we could have numerous type of tokens that fulfill that set of information. But that's perhaps the standardization that you talk about, and what information is necessary in order to make a transaction possible.
Yeah, and also it's mostly from a technical side, and also, I mean, we haven't even touched upon scoring the various assets, because one solar panel is not the other solar panel. Also in a market where you would be trading the assets, how can you compare them to each other? I mean, it's such a big topic, and I can already see that we can talk about this for easily another hour. But as I mentioned earlier, we have to wrap it up. I want to thank you both for your time and your information. To the viewers and listeners, we will host many more podcasts about this as well, as the Energy Token Project is now almost about to finish phase 1, and we are going towards phase 2. We will host more podcasts. If you want to learn more about the Energy Token Project, please feel free to go to 2tokens.org. You will find more about the Energy Token Project, and also don't forget to subscribe to this channel, as you will see all the other podcasts in the future there as well. Kai, Michel, thank you very much for your time. We're going to enjoy.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah,
It's a
it's going
pleasure.
to do a nice
Thank you.
day. Yeah, we've got a roundtable
Michel,
session.
very nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, this is also the nice thing. So we've met a few times over the internet during calls, and now finally we get face to face.
So nice indeed. Yeah, it's so nice indeed to speak with like-minded people without facing the risk of similar to my family caterings, where people fall into sleep when I start talking about it. Yeah. It's nice, so please, to be continued.
This is going to be our day. So thanks again for your time, and to the viewers and listeners, till next time. Bye.
That was it for today's podcast. Thank you for listening in, and please subscribe so you don't miss out on our upcoming episodes. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find our contact details at www.twotokens.org.